Why did the last Tsar had to die? What were the motives of his executioners? In this video you're going to learn about the execution of Tsar Nicholas II. Stay tuned. Stay up near from History Hustle here in Yekaterinburg, Russia. Hustling history on location for you. If you like this content, please consider subscribing. Also hit the notification bell to become part of the hustle. Let's start. Behind me here you see the Church on the Blood here in Yekaterinburg, central Russia. And before this church was built, there was a house which was called the Ipatiev House, also known as the House of Special Purposes. And inside this house, Tsar Nicholas II and his whole family were executed in July 1918 by the Bolsheviks. To understand how this all originated, we need to go back. So when his father, Alexander III, died in 1894, Nicholas II ascended to the throne. The Russian Empire by that time was an empire in decline. It lagged behind on industry and its military, and the latter point became painfully clear when the Russian Empire lost a war against Japan in 1905. The loss of the war against the Empire of the Rising Sun culminated into the Russian Revolution of 1905. Here throughout the Russian Empire, rebellion struck against Tsarist rule. Now the motives for this rebellion were very diverse. There were peasants that rose up against their landlords. There were people that acted out of nationalistic principles and wanted to establish their own state. Anyhow, the revolution was brutally suppressed. And Nicholas II, he issued a manifesto in which he promised reforms. But at the end, these reforms did not change much. See, Nicholas II, he was an autocrat by nature, and he believed in his divine right to rule the Russian Empire. As historian Robert Service wrote the following: he lived and breathed complacent extreme conservatism. In the summer of 1914, the First World War broke out. The Russian Empire fought alongside France and Great Britain against Germany, Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. The Russian army achieved a major victory in Galicia against the Austrian-Hungarians. However, it suffered a tremendous defeat at the hands of the Germans at Tannenberg. The Russian army was not prepared for a war of attrition. Also, many soldiers had no motivation to fight for the Tsar. Many of its peasants had never been outside their village before, so as long as the Germans didn't threaten their village, why should they fight them? In the summer of 1915, the war was going so bad that the Russian military high command ordered the Great Retreat, in which the Russian army retreated eastwards, giving up the territories they had fought for so long and where so many Russian men had died for. And this was a major blow of the morale of the Russian soldier. Also, Nicholas II decided to take up supreme command of the Russian army, and this was a terrible decision because from this point the responsibility of the successes and the failure of the Russian army laid on his shoulders. As historian Orlando Figes wrote, here the Tsar's regime buried itself. In February 1917, the Russian Revolution took place. It started on International Women's Day, where women went out on the street demanding better bread rations. Because of the war, there were many food shortages in the Russian cities. They were soon joined with 100,000 striking workers. After several days, the Tsar's police opened fire on the protesters and several of them died. However, many army detachments mutinied against their officers and joined the rebellion. When Nicholas II heard of this insurgency, he ordered his guards to go to Petrograd and suppress the rebellion. However, its commander refused, and thus Nicholas II decided to abdicate in favor of his brother Michael, who refused the throne, and thus the monarchy was no more. The Tsar and his family stayed at their palace in Sakhoye Selo, the south of Petrograd. Now in August 1918, after the tumultuous July days where the Bolsheviks rose against the provisional government that was put into place after the February Revolution, the leaders of the provisional government feared for the safety of the Tsar and his family, and thus they were sent to the Siberian town of Tobolsk alongside with 30 people of personnel ranging from cooks to butlers. The leaders of the provisional government believed that they were safe there from the revolutionary crowds that were holding up in the west of Russia. In October 1917, another regime change took place in Russia when the Bolsheviks gained power in Petrograd and shortly after in Moscow as well. Near Yekaterinburg, the Bolsheviks also seized power. The Tsar and his family had now a decrease in their luxuries, and also the guards became more rude as the days passed by. In April 1918, the Tsar and his wife were transported to Yekaterinburg, and the children followed the following month. These pictures you see here are most likely the last pictures that have been taken of them. They were put into a house that was placed on where now this church is, the Ipatiev House, also known as the House of Special Purpose. The reason for executing the whole family was pragmatic and political. See, in the summer of 1918, the White Armies had surrounded Yekaterinburg, so therefore evacuating the Tsar and his family successfully became very unlikely. Also, bringing him to Moscow and let him stand trial would give him a stage, and as historian Orlando Figes puts it, it was rather the more fundamental problem that putting the deposed monarch in the dock at all was to presuppose the possibility of his innocence, and in that case the moral legitimacy of the revolution would itself be open to question. To put Nicholas on trial would also be to put the Bolsheviks on trial. Nicholas had to die so that the Soviet power could live. And so it happened. On the night of the 16th to the 17th of July 1918, Yakov Shurovsky, the local Cheka boss, led the Tsar and his family to the basement of the house. There was shooting outside, and he said it was safe for them in the basement. He later returned with an execution squad, and he read a sentence. Nicholas II was confused. He asked a question. The sentence was repeated and then carried out. It became a bloody mess, since some of the family members did not die instantly as bullets ricocheted through the room. Later, the bodies were dumped in unmarked graves, only to be discovered decades later. And it was only years after the fall of the Soviet Union, in 1998, that the remains of the Tsar and his family were officially buried. No written memo has been found in which Lenin ordered the execution of the Tsar and his family. If you want to know more about the Russian Revolution, click right here. Please check me out on Patreon, because with your donations I can travel to cool places like this and make videos for you. Also, if you have any comments, leave them down below. I want to thank you for watching, and until next time.